Welcome everyone to the 89th Celebrity Synastry chart reading, where I will be looking into Zayn Malik and Niall Horan. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Adeline and it is so nice to meet you. On this channel, I look at the dynamic between two celebrities using astrology. For those new and returning, I take notes on a synastry chart looking at the personal planet signs aspects and if birth times available house overlays. I share these notes and add my extra insights and interpretations along the way. Feel free to leave your own in the comments below. So if that sounds good to you, subscribe and click the bell to join us weekly, and let's get right into it. Starting off with the sun, we have Zayn's sun in Capricorn and Niall's sun in Virgo. These are both earth signs. It's a dry relationship and they're a good business team. I mean, fairly accurate start. Niall enjoys serving Zayn and it's a practical relationship, and Zayn helps Niall be more efficient. Zayn's sun overlaid in Niall's 4th house. There's a sense of familiarity and Niall trusts Zayn deeply. There's a strong desire to live together, which I mean kind of works considering they did really live together for all those years touring and everything. Niall feels secure around Zayn. Zayn is very protective of Niall and they are both committed to each other. Niall's sun overlaid in Zayn's 7th house. It's love-hate and they feel united together. So far there is definitely, it seems like they have a very good sort of rapport with each other. They get in each other's heads and they both subconsciously try to prove they are separate from the relationship. I feel like this is a big indicator of them trying to separate themselves from One Direction, and they're sort of like working together. They feel the other is a big presence in their life and they need to find a balance to make the relationship work, which I feel like, considering I guess the sort of extremity when it comes to being in One Direction from everything that has come out since then, it definitely didn't seem like a balanced environment, which makes me feel like potentially due to that lack of balance is why I guess their friendship hasn't continued after. It doesn't seem like they have had a friendship since then at all. They both may be driven to express themselves in extreme ways, and possibility of the personalities being lost in their relationship, which I feel like makes sense because considering, a group as a whole. Possibility of the personalities being lost in their relationship, which I feel like makes sense considering I feel like out of everyone in One Direction, Zayn and Niall, it's not even like they had a personality. It really is their personalities were lost. They were just reduced to Zayn being this sort of broody, sad person, and Niall, his whole thing, I believe it literally was just he was Irish. Compared to the other guys, they had a bit more of a personality. And then Zayn and Niall really didn't have any, which I feel like adds up. Personalities were very much lost. Their suns are trying together, so there's mutual respect and they energize each other and they're supportive of each other. So far, it definitely seems like they are quite supportive of each other. They are cooperative with each other and they accumulate wealth and luck, which, definitely adds up. They can deal with conflict in a healthy way. Zayn's sun square Niall's Mars. There's a competitive nature. I mean, definitely post the group and everything and post their sort of, I guess, more, in present relationship. There's a tendency to interrupt each other and individual egos create problems. So far, I'm imagining between these two, I feel like, you could say with the whole band, I guess. It's unfortunately we can't do a 5-way synastry chart. But with these two anyway, in particular, it seems like there was a thing of they wanted to be the individual star. Like we saw the personalities are lost. They both try to prove they are separate from each other. Their individual egos create problems. It's competitive, very much. They seem to be able to cooperate together and be cordial with each other, but it seems like the main priority is themselves. Productive to work on a mutual goal, and they both need to stop focusing on the details. Zayn feels challenged by Niall's dominance. I wonder in what way, because all we have seen is Niall enjoying to serve Zayn, which would make him not very dominant, make Zayn a bit more dominant. So I wonder in what way. Hopefully we'll see more. They need to respect each other's natural habits and over time get more annoyed with each other. Zayn's Sun square Niall's Jupiter. They have different values and they may overindulge each other. Not surprisingly so. Again, they have a lot of wealth and luck. They're young people. You know, I'm sure fame got to their heads and all the richness and all of that. Excess is from good intention and Niall has the ability to cheer up Zayn, which is where I assume he would enjoy sort of serving Zayn, so to speak. There's a strong desire to make each other happy and they both may expect too much from their relationship. I wonder in what way, because I feel like they kind of got what they wanted out of the group. Maybe potentially one of them wanted to collaborate with the other or continue to stay in touch. They both encourage the other to self-indulge and be impractical. Zayn's Sun conjunct Niall's Uranus. They meet each other suddenly and they are separated at key moments. I mean, the meeting each other suddenly bit makes perfect sense. But separated at key moments, I wonder where. The only thing I can think of is I believe when Zayn left One Direction was when they were still on tour. So in terms of that is very much being separated at a key moment. I'm not sure where else they would have been because they were very much a done deal together if they were going anywhere. They need to embrace spontaneity and the relationship as outside of tradition. I mean, it's one way to put it. But the needing to embrace spontaneity, I wonder if Zayn and Niall were very much, I guess, homebodies, you could say. Maybe they weren't as big on touring and all of that. Zayn is willing to support Niall's desires and Zayn wants more stability. They met when both were looking for something different, obviously wanting, musical success. Zayn triggers Niall to explore his individuality, and Niall challenges Zayn to be more unconventional. Okay. Zayn's Sun conjunct Niall's Neptune. It's a very spiritual relationship and there is intuitive communication and understanding. Both need to be careful to not confuse reality and illusions. I mean, yeah, this relationship boosts Zayn's intuitiveness. Zayn's Sun sextile Niall's Pluto. They have a strong connection. I mean, I see that. They don't seem to be particularly weak. I feel it seems like they are quite, very cordial of each other. They're very supportive of each other, it seems like. So I feel it is quite strong considering what it is. A sort of I mean, literally it was a PR type of relationship, career relationship. They are more powerful together, very much so, and they comfortably share secrets. Niall's Sun conjunct Zayn's Moon. It's a powerful connection and there is a blending of goals, which very much so. I mean, they both had the goal of becoming a singer, and their goals were very much blended into one. Zayn plays a supportive role and Niall tends to lead the relationship. So okay, maybe Niall is the more dominant one. I wonder in what way though. Maybe in terms of really wanting to, maybe he goes out of his way to connect with Zayn and make that friendship and initiate that. Zayn playing a supportive role is also not very surprising. We did see that he's quite protective of Niall, so it makes sense. Niall's Sun and Trine is Zayn's Mercury. They have a great friendship and there's good communication. Niall accepts Zayn, so it makes me think that maybe Niall was very much initiating, welcome Zayn with open arms, as a friend and all of that to, outside of a sort of career thing, if that makes sense, made friends instead of you're my colleague. They both just get each other and they do business together well. Niall supports Zayn's beliefs and they can talk through issues together. Niall gets what makes Zayn tick. So going back to how it is a quite an intuitive, connecting type of relationship. So it seems on both ends, they're able to quite read each other well. Niall admires Zayn's intelligence, which we did see that Zayn helps Niall be more efficient. So I assume in that sort of intellectual way, he would help Niall, which Niall appreciates and admires in return. They understand each other on a basic level and they speak to each other with understanding. Niall allows Zayn to express himself, which goes back to how Niall challenges Zayn to be a bit more unconventional. So Niall seems to be, I guess, quite dominant in terms of really creating that safe space for Zayn. Niall feels he can think better around Zayn. Niall's a sun, Trine Zayn's Uranus. Niall inspires Zayn and frequent changes occur, which is not surprisingly so. I mean, the whole touring thing, that is all frequent changes. They get each other's humor and they encourage each other to be themselves again. So it seems like they are very comfortable with each other and able to be themselves around each other. Niall thinks of Zayn as inspiring and exciting, and Zayn tries to keep the relationship interesting, which I feel like goes back to how they encourage each other to self-indulge and all of that. Niall may feel threatened by Zayn's need for freedom. So going back to, I feel like Zayn, leaving and all of that and wanting that freedom, I assume Niall would have felt threatened by that, because it seems like there is a bit of a theme when it comes to their sort of individuality coming to play here. They both need to encourage the other's independence. Niall's a sun, Trine Zayn's Neptune. It's tolerant and forgiving, and Niall strengthens Zayn's ego. I mean, if he's kind of relying Zayn upon help and all of that, it kind of would, wouldn't it? They're attuned to each other's feelings, which we're seeing again, not surprisingly so, and Zayn inspires Niall to be creative. So it seems like Zayn really helps Niall, creatively speaking. Niall's a sun, Sextile Zayn's Pluto. This is a repeated aspect, just inverted, so pretty much everything from before is further emphasized. There's not inversion to go on to. So now it's time for moon. We have Zayn's moon in Virgo and Niall's moon in Leo. They are the opposites, and Zayn is happy to let Niall be at the center. I wonder in what way. I assume when it comes to actually being in the band rather than post-band life. Potentially maybe Zayn was pushing or trying to push Zayn to be more at the center when it comes to things, because when in the whole throes of the band, it seems like Niall was very much pushed to the side. That's how pretty much everyone felt, or fan base felt. Hard to know how they felt. I don't know if they've come out with comments about that. But it was very much Niall being pushed outside of the center. And it seems like, it seems like Harry and Zayn were really pushed towards the center rather than anyone else. So I wonder if Zayn tried to make it happen for Niall to be pushed more into the center. Niall craves more appreciation than Zayn gives, so potentially maybe Niall wants more validation for his creative work and Zayn just isn't giving it. Zayn's perfectionism can be difficult for Niall to deal with. Which I pretty much what I just said. It seems like maybe Zayn is just not giving that appreciation, potentially because he is that perfectionist and isn't really validating Niall's work. Maybe because he just doesn't like it, it's not up to his standards. Zayn may be embarrassed by Niall, and Zayn's conservativeness clashes with Niall's superficiality, which we did see before. It seems like they potentially were homebodies that do need to embrace that spontaneity together. But we did see there that Zayn wants that stability. And now we're seeing this sort of clash of Zayn's conservativeness and Niall's superficiality. Potentially there was that conflict when it comes to maybe Niall wanting that sort of starlight, spotlight and everything, and Zayn just doesn't. Zayn's moon overlaid in Niall's 12th house. There's a lack of trust. I thought, with what we have seen, it seems like there is a bit of trust, they're able to share secrets, they're quite supportive of each other. Zayn feels that Niall is hiding something. Okay, I guess it comes from those suspicions. Niall senses Zayn's suspicions, and there is no logical base for this lack of trust or paranoia, which I can't disagree with considering what we have seen thus far. Difficult for them to deal with wounded feelings, which I feel like mostly hints at Niall, maybe his feelings are pretty wounded by Zayn. Niall's moon overlaid in Zayn's 6th house. Niall has conflicting feelings towards Zayn. I really see this definitely in terms of it seems like he really appreciates Zayn's help and all of that. But it seems like, I guess, he enjoys the sort of initiation, the process and all of that. But I feel like the end result he probably does not seem to like when Zayn isn't, I guess, giving him that validation, which I feel like potentially would give Niall overall conflicting feelings with, Zayn's help. They are both too helpful to each other, and it is easy to create a resentful relationship. Can be beneficial of working towards a common goal. Zayn's moon are trine Niall's Uranus. They both feel free to express themselves, not surprisingly so, and Niall is more open around Zayn. As I'm saying, I feel like I'm repeating again. It's like, I feel like literally open arms Niall has for Zayn. Ideas of unconventional domestic setup bring them together. I mean, the way they lived, very unconventional. They can cope with sudden changes together, and there's a level of unpredictability, which we have seen sudden changes together, so it's nice that they seem to be able to cope with that. Niall feels safe around Zayn, and they enjoy talking about social issues, and mutual friends may bring them together. So potentially in the sense that, you know, because we do all know how they were brought together literally. So I wonder if, like, when it comes to actually getting on the X Factor show, maybe friends encourage them to go on it, and in a sense that, you know, would have mutual friends brought them together. Zayn's moon are trine Niall's Neptune. Zayn picks up on Niall's needs. Again, that whole, they seem to be able to like be quite intuitive with each other, read each other well. They inspire the other, and art is a shared interest, not surprisingly so. They sense each other's feelings, and they share a sensitive and mystical worldview. It's a mystical meeting. I mean, it's one way to put it. It's definitely a sort of like fate coming together, like never happened before or never will happen again, really. They both uncover the other's blind spots. Niall's moon is sextile Zayn's Jupiter. They have good fortune, and they're a popular couple. Yeah, duh. There's honest communication and likely for them to support charity. So going to how they enjoy talking about social issues, maybe they were the ones that initiated it within the band. Excessiveness could be an issue we're seeing again, and they have an intellectual understanding. Niall's moon are opposite Zayn's Saturn. They both have something the other needs. Okay, and there's a difficult emotional connection. We haven't seen a whole lot of that. The only way I could really interpret this is with the whole, like, we did see like a couple bits that like feel comfortable, open with each other, able to share secrets, and the contrasting thing with that where Zayn has a lack of trust and everything. Zayn tries to influence Niall, and Zayn sees Niall as needy and immature. I mean, if Niall has the tendency to ask for help, the neediness, you know, I'm not surprised. Niall needs to be more independent from Zayn. It's weird because in one way, Niall is a bit more dominant when it comes to, I guess, like befriending Zayn. But I feel like creatively speaking, he's not. So now it's time for Mercury. We have Zayn's Mercury in Capricorn and Niall's Mercury in Libra. These are both cardinal signs. Zayn gets impatient with Niall. I'm not really surprised. Zayn teaches Niall to be more practical, which I feel like we already have seen, like, Zayn teaching Niall. It seems like he's really trying to like teach Niall, you know, get the skill, sort of like the whole saying, like, you know, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime sort of thing. It seems like Zayn was trying to implement that, like trying to teach Niall, but it seems like for whatever reason, Niall seems to be going back for help frequently. It seems like to the point where it's annoying Zayn and making him impatient. You're needy, Niall. Niall teaches Zayn to be open-minded. Again, it seems like really opening up the other's eyes really is a big part of this friendship they have together. They fundamentally communicate the same way. Zayn's Mercury overlaid in Niall's 4th house. Niall's emotions are sensitive to Zayn's words. I kind of feel bad for him though. Like, Niall seems to be quite sensitive, like in the creative sense. Niall can predict what Zayn will say, and Niall is comfortable with Zayn. They both feel well in each other's lives. Niall's Mercury overlaid in Zayn's 7th house. Niall senses Zayn will accept the way he thinks. I think this is where, like, the whole sense intuitive thing they have going on, I feel like this is where Niall fails. I mean, potentially outside of like the whole music creative sense, I don't feel like they are bad outside of that. I just feel like definitely in a creative sense there is that conflict. So outside of that, maybe, you know, Zayn does accept the way Niall thinks. There is strong communication and there is an intellectual bond. Zayn's Mercury square Niall's Mars. They challenge each other and differences cause irritation. Debates quickly turn into arguments, and Niall has a habit of interrupting Zayn. Niall tries to force his opinion on Zayn, and Zayn is too critical of Niall. I'm not really liking this. I mean, not surprising for the criticism on Zayn's part, but also a bit weird where Niall is trying to force his opinion, especially considering that he seems to be very, like, encouraging Zayn to be, like, more open and, like, be more unconventional, whatever, all of that, be himself. So it's a bit weird that Niall is forcing his opinion. Living together is difficult. Again, seeing a domestic factor, living together, all of that. Now for the intermission. This video is brought to you by me, my Etsy store, Adeline the Astrologer. If you ever watch this and think, hey, I would like her to read my Synastry chart, well, I will. I do personalized Synastry chart readings on my Etsy store. I do both basic and detailed ones. The basic ones are a bit more simple to understand and really good for those just beginning out in astrology, getting their heads around it, or just as a fun gift idea. The detailed readings are very similar to what I do here, so it's a lot of it just with my insights and interpretation on the chart. So if you're interested in that and everything else, astrology and tarot, readings and gifts, definitely check out my Etsy store for that. I'm always releasing new other things there as well. And you can even just favorite the store just to support me for free. Thank you for listening, and let's get back to the reading. Zayn's Mercury square Niall's Jupiter. It's a relationship that expands consciousness, and Niall helps Zayn go through hard times with optimism. Not surprisingly, so I feel like Niall is a bit more sort of like, I guess, you know, lighthearted, like he's happy to be here. Promising more is a problem, and there's a habit of interrupting, which I'm not really surprised. I mean, we just saw Niall has that habit of interrupting Zayn, but it seems like both of them seem like they have their, you know, own opinions and own ways of doing things. Although it seems like Niall is a bit more susceptible to, you know, feedback from Zayn and that help from Zayn, you know, potentially there is that habit of interrupting there if they are both naturally like that, if that makes sense. Niall is frustrated with Zayn's analytical approach to life, and Niall may come off as holier than thou. Oh gosh. Lack of understanding regarding each other's ideas, and there are communication difficulties. There is a strong mental and intellectual bond. I feel like intellectually speaking, yes, because they are able to work together. And I feel like, I mean, obviously the whole band success doesn't revolve around Zayn and Niall. But I feel like if there was a broken chain link, I don't feel like they would have lasted for as long as they did. Because there are plenty of like boy bands, especially boy bands of talent shows, that they don't last very long. There are frequent misunderstandings, and there are different philosophical views, and debates can turn into arguments. Zayn's Mercury conjuncts Niall's Uranus. Niall challenges Zayn's way of thinking, so I assume this is where he would come off as like holier than thou, trying to force his opinion on Zayn. They are impulsive together, and they both enjoy experimenting, so I assume this would come to sort of like music, more so on Niall's end rather than Zayn's. They come up with original ideas together, and they discover new ways of seeing the world together. Zayn truly understands Niall's originality. Doesn't seem like he appreciates it though. They grow intellectually together, and they casually talk about taboos. They share an interest in unusual topics, so they're definitely that sort of more unconventional, unusual, weirder side of life. It seems like that seems to bond them over anything else. They are creative together, and they find uncommon solutions to problems. Zayn's Mercury conjunct Niall's Neptune. Spirituality is prioritized. This also keeps coming up, like the whole spiritual, mystical side of life. It's a telepathic-like connection, and Zayn helps Niall turn his dreams into reality. Habit of telling the other what they want to hear. I wonder in what way, because it seems like they are both quite honest with each other, maybe outside of the whole creativity thing, but it seems like overall they are quite open with each other, so I'm not sure where. The only thing I can think of is we haven't seen too much when it comes to like Zayn leaving besides like they're separated at key moments. But potentially maybe Zayn like had the habit of telling Niall what he wanted to hear when it comes to sort of like the longevity of the band and his like sort of part in the band. There's deceptive and exaggerative communication, and Zayn finds Niall confusing. I think from his perspective, like, because it seems like Niall is very much, seems to be open to Zayn and wanting Zayn's help. But at the same time, like, you have Niall trying to force his opinion as well and trying to be the sort of like, having the higher opinion, if that makes sense, which is confusing. And I'm sure for Zayn it would be confusing, because why are you asking me for help? They are compassionate towards each other, and it's hard to talk about practical matters. I mean, not surprisingly so. There seems to be conflict when it comes to the more practical, intellectual things. So now it's time for Venus. We have Zayn's Venus in Pisces and Niall's Venus in Leo. They are generous with each other, and Zayn gets easily hurt by Niall. Oh, Zayn doesn't give Niall the devotion he wants. We're seeing again. Niall is flattered by Zayn's dependency. In what way? Like, the only way I can think of is this sort of like more sort of like maybe spiritual relationship, or the sort of friendship they have where they are able to be quite open with each other. Niall wants Zayn to be more honest. Yeah, I mean, I guess going back to my sort of interpretation of telling they have the habit of telling what they want to hear, maybe it's Zayn matches. Zayn's Venus overlaid in Niall's 5th house. Zayn is forgiving of Niall's faults. I assume why he would try to keep helping Niall. Niall appreciates the admiration from Zayn. In what way? I guess like maybe the sort of help he gets from Zayn, like, because that's tension. Niall may take advantage of Zayn, and they are both satisfied here. Okay. Niall's Venus overlaid in Zayn's 6th house. Niall feels they don't have much in common, which if that is like, very much the case, that's pretty nice of Niall to be like having open arms for Zayn. They're together as a result of duty or obligation. I mean, not surprisingly so, that literally that's a great way to summarize their relationship. It's a helpful and productive relationship. Niall's Venus opposite Zayn's Saturn. Niall feels he is below Zayn. I mean, not surprisingly so. Like, as Zayn sees him needy and immature, it is there for a reason. It's karmic, and Zayn fears Niall's withdrawal. Interesting. Oh, I wonder if maybe Zayn felt Niall was going to leave the band, which I'm surprised, because it seems like, from what we have seen so far anyway, it seems like Zayn is quite detached from the band. Maybe it comes from a place of being, I don't know if being self-conscious is the right word, but, I'm feeling really detached from the band. I'm wanting to leave. Maybe everyone else is feeling this way. I want to jump. Zayn can become critical and demanding of Niall. I mean, we keep seeing that Zayn is critical of Niall. What's new? Toxic cycles easily occur. I mean, 100%. Like, considering what we have seen about Niall, particularly, it seems like it is a bad cycle. Like, Niall is conflicted about like Zayn and like help from Zayn and all of that. It really seems like it. It seems like he's happy to initiate, Zayn, help me, whatever. But it seems like, he doesn't seem to be appreciative of the end result, because Zayn seems to be quite critical of Niall. So it seems like I can imagine if Niall keeps asking for this help, that cycle is pretty toxic. They have a difficult meeting. I wonder maybe initially they didn't have the best impression of the other, and that's why Niall was very pushing to have that friendship. It's a long term. I mean, in a way, yeah. Niall sees Zayn as controlling and unsympathetic. I don't blame him though, but why do you keep asking you for help? Zayn sees Niall as vain and childish, we're seeing again, and they may be critical of each other due to the jealousy. Potentially there is that jealousy and fear of the other one being the sort of breakout star. Niall's Venus squares Zayn's Pluto. There's a fine line between love and hate, which I believe we did see in the beginning. There's love-hate, and not surprisingly so, because it seems like they are like, outside of work-related things, it seems like they're pretty okay. But the thing is, I feel like a lot of their relationship and time together would have been working, would have been the band. So, it's a lot of opportunity to have that fine line between love and hate. They bring out each other's deepest insecurities. I'm sure on Niall's end, he's like, a bit weird that he keeps asking for help when it seems like he knows what's going to happen, but it sucks for him, I'm sure. There's an intense fear of losing each other. Power struggles happen. I mean, I see this mostly on Niall's end, because it seems like he's trying to be the more assertive one, but it's not really working. Zayn has the higher power. Yeah, in that sense he does. So now it's time for Mars. We have Zayn's Mars in Cancer and Niall's Mars in Libra. These are both cardinal signs. It's a passive-aggressive relationship. I mean, they have the foundation for it for sure. The relationship is slow to start and they both avoid confrontation. So I feel like there would have been some kind of like, initial bad meeting with each other, and then eventually they kind of became friends. Zayn finds it easy to manipulate Niall. They work through conflict together smoothly, and Niall as an equal, Zayn is submissive. I'm sure we're not seeing this again. This is a one-off thing. There is no way that... no way. Zayn's Mars overlaid in Niall's 10th house. Zayn brings out Niall's competitive side, which I'm not really surprised. It seems like Zayn is quite like helpful of Zayn like career-wise and would probably help him be more competitive, have that ambition and drive. There's a cold and detached chemistry, and neither know what they want from the other. Definitely Niall. I mean, sure Zayn, but definitely Niall. Zayn wants to impress Niall. I wonder in what way, because it seems like it's the other way around. Niall tends to put his walls up with Zayn, and Niall both craves and fears Zayn's stability. Yeah, see, this is, toxic cycle. Poor Niall. Because that's what it is. He seems like he really wants Zayn's help, but also fears it. The relationship seems intense to outsiders. Yeah. Niall's Mars overlaid in Zayn's 7th house. Niall speeds up the relationship, so yeah, he seems to be the one that is definitely initiating like a friendship with Zayn. Niall is calmer around Zayn, and Niall wants to please Zayn. Yeah, that's what I'm expecting. They both enjoy spending time together. Their Mars signs are squared to each other, so there is a lack of basic understanding of each other, and they push each other. In a sense, they do. On Zayn's end, it seems like he pushes him in like a creative intellectual sense. On Niall's end, it seems like in a more sort of friendship sense, but also like, trying to encourage Zayn to be himself, whatever. It's difficult long term. In a way, yes, because I mean, there is a reason, I assume, why they aren't friends together. And I feel like considering a lot of their, time together would have been work, it seems like work is where, like, they seem to be getting success from it, but it also seems to be quite challenging. Zayn's Mars squared Niall's Jupiter. They meet in a fun way, and in a way, I guess, like on a talent competition, yeah. Niall sees Zayn as selfish, and Zayn sees Niall's logic as a hindrance. They encourage each other to be reckless, going back to the beginning, and Niall may be a bad influence on Zayn. I don't know what way, because... maybe Niall is the one that is, I guess, kind of encouraging the more reckless thing, because Niall seems to be quite good on the sort of friendship end. So maybe he is, trying to... And I mean, they were young, like, teenage boys, of course. Like, one of them is going to be reckless. Surprisingly, not both of them. Zayn's Mars opposite Niall's Uranus. Zayn needs to learn not to take Niall's actions personally, and there are frequent arguments. Okay. Zayn's Mars opposite Niall's Neptune. Opposite approaches to taking risks, which I feel like makes sense. Like, definitely contrasting approaches to on a creative intellectual front. They argue about the differences between their wants. Niall's Mars, Trine, Zayn's Saturn. Zayn is the anchor. Funnily enough, I mean, kind of, like, he's definitely invested in this relationship in a way. They both can achieve a lot together, which it's kind of unfortunate that it seems like they're able to achieve a lot, but actually, like, getting that achievement proves to be quite difficult. Niall feels he can depend on Zayn. Okay. Zayn appreciates Niall's individuality, which is nice. The individuality seems to be quite important, valued with these two. Niall's Mars squares Zayn's Uranus. Exciting but unstable, and it's not long term. I mean, I feel like the long term karmic note was the most accurate, because it's not positively long term. Zayn triggers Niall's temper, and Niall gets easily irritated with Zayn. Why does Niall bother with Zayn is my question. He seems to be quite distressed. They may encourage the other to be reckless, we're seeing again, and Zayn sees Niall as a threat to his independence. I mean, I guess you could see this overall, like, as a band. But you could also see this as like Niall being very dependent on Zayn. Maybe like Niall is kind of maybe ruining Zayn's creative flow. Zayn distances himself from Niall. Oh, yeah. Niall's is Mars square Zayn's Neptune. Circumstances in meeting were never understood by one of the partners. Maybe initially so, because probably I imagine in, you know, when you are sort of young in the X Factor, and then randomly like you're gonna sing with these people now. Potentially like in the moment, maybe even now, but I mean it's public knowledge now, so surely. But probably like at the time, maybe they didn't understand why they were put together, or like literally the circumstances around it. They need honesty to make this work. I feel like since they have honesty, it's going to take a lot more than honesty, and it's not even worth it anymore. So that was the final aspect, bringing us to the end of the reading. If you are still watching, please share your thoughts below. I would be very curious to see what you guys have to say about this one. What an interesting reading. Definitely different, I guess you could say. If you have made it this far, please consider subscribing for more. I post these readings weekly. Besides that, give this video a like, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!